All right, hey friends, we have the pleasure of having Rabbi Craig here, who is going to share with us the surprisingly Jewish origins of superheroes. We're happy to have him here. Thank you for being here, fellow New Yorker. Hard not to love that. Let's see where he takes us.
Superman, Batman, Aquaman, they're all Jewish. Goldman, Feldman, Bergman, you see the pattern? Anything ending in man? No, that's not why they have Jewish origins. But it's interesting when you look at each one of these and where they started out, they all have that in common. Just about everyone that we know today. And they've become big business. In fact, if you cleaned out your attic and found that you had a copy of Superman #1, you'll be rich. In the millions of dollars for that one comic book when they came out. So we're going to look into some of the history of this and the unifying themes. I also have a little bit of show and tell. So when you think Jewish superheroes, there's the comedy like this one here. Not necessarily talking about these parody ones. By the way, the Hebrew letter on that guy's shirt is an S. So it's supposed to be a parody of Superman if you know your Hebrew. Shalom Man was legitimately released, but not a serious superhero. The Hebrew Hammer was a comedy movie, more like these guys. And I have these books right here. So a lot of the material I'll be sharing with you today comes from these sources, from Krakow to Krypton, Up, and Oy Vey. And this little one, Superman is Jewish. And 3 books, all on the same subject. They must have something in common. So we're going to go back in time a little bit to the 1920s. And talk about how this got started. 20s, the dailies would put out comic strips. They'd be part of the newspaper. In the early 30s, a nice Jewish man got the idea he could amalgamate all of the comic strips into a new publication and then sell that to gather up all the comics from different dailies, because you had newspapers competing with each other, and maybe put in some puzzles and games, and there it is. Famous Funnies #1 comes out in 1933. Charlie Gaines, who was really Maxwell Ginsburg, you might say he had a secret identity. It's going to be a recurring. Putting out the strips. Within a few years, we get the birth of Superman in 1938 by 2 nice Jewish boys named Siegel and Schuster in Cleveland. Then you have Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, who changed his name from Jacob Kurtzberg, again, to escape some discrimination. They came up with a little man named Captain America, and we're going to look at him in just a moment. Bob Kane, who was born Khan, and Bill Finger created a new guy called Batman, you might have heard of. And then Kirby gets together with Stanley Lieber, who changes his name to Stan Lee, and goes on to found Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Fantastic Four, Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, all came out of their imagination, all in the same time frame. There were, starting in 2008, with Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. The success of that movie launched the whole franchise, and they've made movies about everybody. I've mentioned Doctor Strange, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man, Thor, the Incredible Hulk. They've all been made into movies. Some of you remember in the 70s and 80s, there was an Incredible Hulk TV show that did very well as well. And Superman's been in cartoons before and in live-action TV. So it's not that we're strangers to this, but they've really taken off in the last couple decades. So here's, not to leave out the DC universe, because you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which by far is the larger of the franchise, but you get your Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, all showing up on the DC side. 2 competing superpowers, if you were, in the superhero world, and they're making just as many movies these days and selling just as many tickets. And by the way, bonus, they got an Israeli lady to play Wonder Woman, so that was kind of... It was created basically out of thin air, didn't have any barriers. It made sense for these creative types to go into it. And it was wish fulfillment, seeing Captain America punching Adolf Hitler in the face and doing all these cool things before the U.S. was even in the war, showed the expression of hopes and desires. The Golem story, which we'll talk about, is all about a super being that was created as a protector. If only we had somebody strong who could take care of our oppressors. Social problems have always been at the core of Jewish values. We're going to talk about the bottom. Superman has a threefold message: truth, justice, and the American way. Well, that's ripped right from our own sages 2,000 years ago who wrote, "The world rests on three things: justice, truth, and peace." Swap out the last one for the American way, and you've got yourself Superman. By the way, interesting story about this. There's probably dozens of variants of it, but the main one is the Golem of Prague. The Jewish community was being harassed. They created this clay colossus to protect them, but he was uncontrollable and turned on the very creators, and they had to get rid of it. Sounds a lot like the Incredible Hulk, who, when he gets angry, just smashes everything without really paying attention to who's friend or foe. Interestingly enough, written on the figure there is the Hebrew word emet, which is truth. If you take away the first letter, which is a silent letter, you just get met, which means death or dead. That's how they got rid of the golem. They erased one letter and he fell over and he was done. So that's a legend that we've had for 500 plus years. And of course, when a raging sun makes death and destruction imminent for his people, an infant child is hidden inside a vessel and sent far away, where he's found and raised by kind adoptive parents. You get the idea. This story could be Moses, could be Superman. It's the same thing. The only difference is the technology involved. The sun was Pharaoh. He considered himself a god, as well as the sun god Ra and all the gods of Egypt. It's absolutely the Moses story. Here you have Moses in the basket, probably from the Ten Commandments movie, and there you have Kal-El, literally voice of God, going into his little basket, and he ends up in Iowa. Smallville, to be precise. This logo. And in the more recent movies, they actually bring this up in the dialogue. They say, what does that mean? And Superman says, well, in my language, it means honor, or whatever the answer is. But it's an S. It's S for Superman. But it looks a whole lot like a Hebrew letter on the right, which is one of the unique letters. It's a letter that we use for L, called Lamed, which actually comes from the root word to learn or to teach. We recently have started to see movies about, with Chris Evans playing that titular character. He started, there's the cover of Captain America #1, 1941, March, months before Pearl Harbor, let alone the entrance of the U.S. into the war in Europe, which didn't take place for a number of years. But there he is, punching Adolf Hitler across the face, doing what everybody wanted to do but couldn't do. Here, Ben Grimm was always assumed to be Jewish, but he actually had kind of a coming out in 2002 in the comic book that I showed you, and then they gave him a full-on wedding. Openly Jewish, practicing in the wedding edition. He has a bar mitzvah, and he's up there at the pulpit talking to the crowd, giving a sermon, and it's really weird to see a comic book character doing that, especially one that is Ruth Bat Seraph, which is interesting because in Hebrew, Bat Seraph means daughter of the messenger. And a seraph was not just any messenger, they're one of the angel messengers that supposedly live with the cherubs up there, going around with harps, whatever you want to picture them as, on clouds. So it's daughter of an angel, defender of Israel, the first and probably last Israeli superheroine, came out in the 70s or 80s. She's a policewoman by day. Her alter ego is Superwoman. Are you ready to see this evidence with your own eyes? You'll never be able to unsee it. Here you go. Proof that Spider-Man is a member of the tribe. There he is at the Western Wall. Chances are this was filmed at or near the Jewish holiday of Purim, which is basically Jewish Halloween. We dress up in costumes. Or maybe that's just the way this guy liked to go around. Who knows? But it's kind of cute to see that. A bunch of rabbis and random superhero. But all things aside, there was a recent movie series, Into the Spider-Verse, which basically answered the question, what if there were multiple universes, would there be a Spider-Man in each one? And the answer was, oh yeah, of course. There's got to be at least one. And some of this, he's a bit of a nebbish, as we say. He's full of self-doubt. He loves bagels, occasionally uses Yiddish, so maybe. Just saying. Here's Kitty Pryde, another openly Jewish one. Before Ben Grimm came out as Jewish, even though he was suspected, the writers gave a new character an absolutely Jewish identity. He mentioned it, Rabbi Weinstein, in his little talk there. There's the issue where she's lighting a memorial candle. And then here is a photo of like all the supposedly Jewish characters getting together for a Hanukkah celebration. So there's Ben Grimm, the rock guy from the Fantastic Four. There's Kitty Pryde, who's one of the X-Men. She has a cool trick, by the way. Her secret power is she can just walk through walls. That'd be kind of useful to have, right? Villains, or anti-heroes. It's hard to call Magneto a villain. If you know your comic book lore, he is a mutant who can bend metal and attract metal. He's like a magnet, a human magnet. If there's anything metallic around, he can manipulate it. But then he starts to hate the humans who don't have a mutation, who are discriminating against the ones who do. The whole premise of the X-Men is that a subset of humans find out they have a special power, and there are two competing forces that try to gather these people up. You have Professor X, who wants to use these powers for good, and you have Magneto, who wants to assemble an army to fight the regular humans who want to keep them down. So he presents an understandable villain. He's not the true mustache-twirling villain who just wants to do bad for bad's sake. He has a reason to hate humanity, and that reason starts in the Holocaust. And this, showing him even way back in the 70s and 80s, he referenced his beginnings in Auschwitz, that he saw humans treating each other so terribly. Life meant nothing, so therefore they mean nothing to me. Try to give you an explanation to why he is the way he is. So he's still a bad guy in the comic world. He wants to use these special powers that they have to rise above and be better than everyone else, and not to use them to help, but you can almost understand why that is. So it's the end. There's a picture of the rock, the thing, at his Jewish wedding. And then, of course, I want to dedicate this to the guy who started most of it. He didn't create Superman or Batman, but pretty much everything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that we know today came out of the imagination of either Jack Kirby or his partner Stan Lee. Stan Lee, by the way, right up until his death, had a cameo in every one of the Marvel movies. He was a FedEx delivery guy in one scene. He was a random patron in a diner in another scene. He managed to insert himself and usually had a line or two in every single one of the movies, kind of as an homage to him. And he passed away in 2018, so obviously that's not a thing anymore. And that's what I have for you today, with a little bit of show and tell. So we're done there. Thank you. Over here, comics and the superheroes, there's still this tradition of telling a story graphically. I have here one from Art Spiegelman called Mouse. This is a very famous one, telling the Holocaust story, but using cats and mice as the protagonists and antagonists. So the cats are the Nazis, the mice are the Jews, and it's a retelling of that story in a fictionalized way. But this made it onto some banned book lists in some school systems. And it's because it's the dark tale. It's a tale of real events, but told through a comic book way. Guys who wrote all of these comic books back in the day were relying on what they knew, storytelling. They were artists who were locked out of many of the art schools. So they created an entirely new medium. It's funny, when people like to take out an anti-Semitic trope and they'll say, well, the Jews control the weather, and they control the banks, and they control Hollywood, and they control everything. We have a space laser, apparently. Yeah, I know. I keep asking for my turn with it. They keep saying no. But never has anyone come out and said the Jews control the comic book industry, but that's the one they'd be right about, because we created it. Now, it doesn't mean it's only Jewish creators. It has certainly evolved, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, tens of thousands of different comic books and superheroes. The big ones that we all know, Marvel and DC, with all the famous names, they were 100% all created by Jewish people about a century ago. So that's the one that we would love to take credit for, but nobody ever says that. When you go to a Marvel movie, maybe you can understand a little bit more about why these characters came into existence. So how did they evolve 100 years later? We're not in World War II anymore, so we don't Captain America punching any bad guys. Who are the bad guys nowadays in the superhero movies? There are societal problems. There are conflicts. There are people being not kind to each other or discriminating. The superhero is there to stand up for the underdog, for what is right. Those are values that never go away. Whether it's right, nobody's thought this stuff through. I want to be able to walk through walls. That's great until you have to take an airplane somewhere. Can you turn that power on and off? Otherwise, you're just dropping down from 36,000 feet. So it's not realistic. It's not meant to be realistic. It's meant to get us to imagine, what power do I have? Each of us, do we have a superpower? maybe not like they do in the comics, but we do have the power to change the world. And when we change it for one family or one person, you are a superhero to them.